Have you ever found yourself doing something totally ordinary and suddenly felt a strange sense of unease? There's no big news, no crisis. No one said anything upsetting. And yet, while washing dishes, folding a blanket, or simply sipping a cup of tea in the quiet morning light, this odd discomfort slips in, quietly. It's not loud, it's not clear, but it lingers. Like a thin mist in a familiar room, making you feel not quite at home inside your own mind. And maybe you've asked yourself, why do I feel anxious when there's nothing to be anxious about? I've heard this question so many times, especially from older folks, people who've lived full, resilient lives. They've raised children, built families, survived loss, worked hard for decades. And yet, when life finally slows down, when the noise settles, that's when the anxiety creeps in. Not with a name, not with a face, but it follows. And I often respond gently. Anxiety doesn't always come from big events. Sometimes it rises in the quietest moments because the mind has nowhere to rest. We live in a world that's noisy and busy, constantly moving. And ironically, when we finally get a little time, the kids are grown, work has slowed, the house is in order. That's exactly when our inner restlessness starts to surface. Because now, we're no longer too busy to notice it. There was a man I once guided in meditation. His name was Frank. A retired carpenter, living in a modest home on the edge of town. He'd been married for nearly 50 years. Each morning, he and his wife would share breakfast, take a walk, then he'd head to his workshop to craft little things with wood. But after she passed from heart disease, the house became too quiet. And the quiet wasn't as peaceful as he once imagined. Frank told me that in the early mornings, he'd sit at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and feel his heart race. No one was saying anything. Nothing was happening. But something inside him felt unsettled. I asked, "What are you afraid of, Frank?" He shook his head. "I don't know. It just feels like something bad is about to happen, even though nothing really is." You see, what was really happening was that Frank's mind had lost its anchor. It drifted into missing his wife, into the unfamiliar territory of aging, into a space in life he'd never learned how to be with. So I taught him something simple, something that changed his entire inner world: mindfulness. Now, mindfulness doesn't have to be complicated. It's not about becoming a monk or meditating for hours. At its heart, it just means coming back to this moment, to your breath, to your body, to whatever small thing you're doing right now. I didn't tell Frank to sit like a monk. I simply said, "Frank, tomorrow morning when you drink your coffee, instead of letting your mind wander, try closing your eyes. Breathe in, breathe out, count your breaths. And every time your thoughts drift, gently guide them back. Just breathe." He was skeptical at first, but he tried. 5 minutes each morning, in the little garden outside his house, sitting on the wooden bench he built himself. He didn't try to get rid of anxiety. He didn't force peace. He just breathed and noticed he was breathing. Then, one morning, he said to me, "I started hearing the birds again. I could hear the breeze in the trees." And I realized the anxiety didn't go away, but it wasn't holding me anymore. I smiled, because that is the quiet strength of mindfulness. It doesn't suppress anxiety. It doesn't erase fear. But it gives your mind a place to stand, a steady ground right in the middle of everything. In the Satipatthana Sutta, the Buddha teaches, dwell observing the body in the body, with diligence, clarity, and mindfulness to overcome grief and sorrow. In other words, when you're truly present with your body and mind, worries, fears, anxiety lose their grip. You don't need to be a meditation master. You don't need to be perfectly healed. You just need to start with your breath. It sounds simple, but it's a profound act of coming home. So if this morning you feel anxious, even if it's vague, without reason, don't blame yourself. Don't rush to fix it. And please, don't force yourself to be strong. Instead, just pause. Place your hand on your heart. Take a deep breath and gently whisper to yourself, I am here. I am alive. Right now. Right here. It might just be 3 minutes. But if you do this every day like Frank did, you'll start to notice anxiety might still visit, but it doesn't stay long, because now you've built a home inside yourself. A quiet anchor. A safe shore called mindfulness. I've met many older folks here in the US who've said to me, I feel alone. My mind drifts all day. There's no one left. And I always say to them, you don't need someone to hold you in place. You just need to learn how to hold yourself with deep, compassionate presence. Your breath, your footsteps, the sound of birds outside your window, they are all calling you back to now. Because mindfulness is the most gentle way to meet anxiety. Not with force, but with loving awareness. There's something I've often noticed during meditation sessions or group sharings at the center. People tend to think anxiety is a sign that something is wrong. Wrong with themselves. Wrong with their life. Wrong with the way they think. Have you ever felt that way? Have you ever sat alone in the quiet of the night, nothing dramatic happening, and suddenly a thought crept in? Maybe there's something wrong with me. Why am I always so anxious? I've sat across from many people just like you. People who've been strong their whole lives, carried their families, survived loss, worked hard, held everything together. And yet, a thought as thin as smoke could shake them. Not because something was actually happening, but because they believed something was wrong, simply because they were anxious. But you know, Buddhism teaches us something very different. It teaches us this: not every thought is true, and not every thought needs to be believed. Thoughts are just visitors in the mind. They come and they go, like clouds drifting across the sky, like echoes from an old conversation you forgot long ago. But your brain still remembers. You don't need to chase them. You don't need to fight them. You just need to remember. This too is just a thought. That little phrase, so simple, yet so deep, has helped many people I know find their way out of the spiral of anxiety. One of them was a woman named Marlene. She's 76, a widow, lives alone at the end of a quiet street. Every afternoon, she sits in her old armchair, looking out at her garden. The flowers still bloom. The birds still fly over the wooden fence. But her mind isn't as peaceful as it used to be. She once told me, my anxiety doesn't shout. It whispers, what if my daughter forgets to call? What if I left the stove on? What if one day I suddenly forget who I am? Those thoughts came like a cold breeze, not enough to knock things over, but just enough to chill the heart. I asked her, Marlene, are those things actually happening right now? She paused, then sighed. No, they haven't happened, but they could. And that's how anxiety slips in. It doesn't need proof. It only needs possibility. When we believe in a thought about something that hasn't even happened yet, it becomes fear, real and present. But if you really look, fear doesn't come from what's happening. It comes from what we imagine is happening. In Buddhist teachings, we call that delusion, mental images that aren't real, but still grip us. During one meditation session at a senior center, I guided the group through a simple practice. I asked everyone to write down one sentence. This thought is not me. It is just a thought. Then I asked them to read it 3 times, slowly, placing one hand over their heart. At first, many found it silly. Some chuckled. Some shook their heads. It's just words, someone said. But a few weeks later, Marlene came back to me and said, I don't know why, but every time the fear comes, I close my eyes, place my hand on my chest and say, this isn't me, it's just a thought. And somehow, I feel lighter. I smiled, because I knew that was the moment she stopped living inside her thoughts and started watching them. That's the difference, you see, between being swept away and knowing you're being swept. And once you know, you can return. Once you observe, you're no longer trapped. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha said, the mind is the forerunner of all things. The mind is the master. The mind creates everything. If the mind can create a thought, then it can also see that the thought is just a passing ripple. It's not who you are. I often compare the human mind to a house. Thoughts are like guests. Some are kind, some are loud, some are downright weird. But none of them are your landlord. You don't have to rearrange your house for every unexpected visitor. You simply notice who's at the door and decide whether or not to let them in. In truth, when we look anxiety straight in the eye, without flinching, we begin to see, this is just an old thought. This is a familiar pattern. This is my mind trying to protect me by making me afraid. And when you say, this too is just a thought, you're not denying the anxiety. You're calling it by its real name. You're separating it from your identity. You're opening the door, looking it in the eye, and gently saying, I see you, but you are not me. That's not a heroic victory. It's a mindful one, a quiet kind of strength. Sometimes, when I sit on a park bench and watch older folks walk by, some smiling, some frowning, I wonder, how many thoughts in their heads are uninvited guests? So many. But if just one of them paused, took a deep breath, and whispered to themselves, this is just a thought, then one little cloud would float away, and the sky would begin to open up. So if today your heart is heavy with quiet worries, unanswered questions, scenarios that haven't even happened but already make you uneasy, I invite you to try this. Sit still. Place your hand gently on your heart. Take a slow breath and say, this is not me. This is just a thought. Repeat it a few times, softly, like soothing a child within you. Because what you need isn't an instant fix. What you need is a soft return. I've always believed every thought you don't cling to is one step closer to freedom. And you who are listening to me right now, you deserve that freedom. Not when anxiety disappears completely, but the moment you realize, I am no longer defined by it. Let me ask you a small question. Have you ever sat alone, placed a hand gently over your heart, and whispered to yourself, I love you? If not, you're not alone. I've met so many older adults over the years in retreats, tea meditations, or just quiet talks in the temple garden, and they often tell me the same thing. It's easy for me to love others, but loving myself? That just feels strange. Some even laugh a little, almost embarrassed. Venerable, that just sounds selfish. And I understand. Many people from your generation, those who grew up in a time when emotions were kept silent, were taught to be quiet, patient, self-sacrificing. From childhood to old age, you've taken care of everyone else. Aging parents, a sick spouse, children growing up, grandchildren running wild. You've cleaned every corner of the house, and perhaps every wound of others. but maybe you've never paused long enough to see the scratches in your own heart. And then, when life slows down, when the house gets quieter, that's when all the emotions you've pushed aside start to gently knock on the door. Anxiety, loneliness, regret, and sometimes that feeling of being lost. But what breaks my heart the most is not that you feel anxious or sad. It's that you blame yourself for feeling that way. I remember a woman named Ruth. She was a retired nurse. More than 40 years of caring for others, delivering babies, wiping foreheads, holding vigil by her husband's hospital bed until his final breath. She was always known as the strong one. And so, when anxiety crept in after her sister passed away, she felt ashamed. She showed up at our meditation center and sat quietly in the back row. That day, during a mindfulness session, I invited the group to place a hand over their heart and softly say, "May I be at peace." Ruth couldn't do it. Later, she told me, "It felt too weak, teacher. I can pray for others, but for myself, I don't deserve that." I looked into her eyes and said something I want to share with you now. Compassion is not a luxury. It's a birthright, yours too. In Buddhist teachings, compassion isn't just for others. Self-compassion is the very doorway to healing. Because how can you truly love someone if you refuse to love yourself? How can you really hear someone else's suffering if you keep denying the quiet cry within you? The Buddha once said, "You, yourself, as much as anyone in the entire universe, deserve your love and affection." At first glance, that may sound like a pretty quote. But if you stop, close your eyes, and really feel those words, you might cry. Because it touches a part of you that's been forgotten for far too long. Just like Ruth, who once believed that loving herself was weak, selfish, even indulgent. But she decided to try. Just one small act. Each morning, after brushing her teeth, she would look in the mirror, place a hand on her chest and say, "I'm doing the best I can. Not perfect, not as strong as she once was, but still here, still alive, still learning how to love." After a month, she told me her anxiety hadn't disappeared, but it didn't feel so lonely anymore. She said, "At least, I don't hate myself anymore when I feel anxious." And you know what? Sometimes, that's the turning point. I'm not here to tell you that compassion will magically erase all pain. It won't, but what compassion does is soften a heart that's been clenching too long. It holds the trembling without abandoning it. There's a beautiful image in Buddhist practice. Anxiety is like a frightened child crying inside you, and metta-loving kindness is the mother's hand. You don't need to fix that child. You don't need to make her stop crying. You don't need to scold her. You just need to hold her and say, "I see you. You're scared. That's okay. I'm still here." If you can say that to yourself, even once, you've already traveled a long way on the path of healing. I remember an elderly man from one of our autumn retreats. He was in his 82nd, a retired Marine. He stood tall, spoke like a commander. But after 3 days of noble silence, he came to me and said something I'll never forget. "Venerable, all my life I've been taught how to stand tall, but I never learned how to sit down and hold myself." I placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "Today, you've learned it." And he cried. A man who seemed too tough to cry, cried because for the first time, he was kind to himself. If you're hearing my voice now, and there's a hollow place in your heart that doesn't quite have a name, don't rush to fill it with work or distractions. Fill it with compassion, with kind words spoken inward, with the deep understanding that I may not always be strong, but I'm here, and I deserve to be loved even when I'm imperfect. You can try it right now, no preparation needed. Just you, your breath, your hand, your heart. Place your hand gently over your chest. Close your eyes and whisper, "May I be at peace. May I be loved. May I be gentle with myself." You don't have to believe it right away, but say it anyway. Because compassion, as the Buddha taught, is a medicine we must take daily, not just when we're in pain, but even when we feel okay, so the soul never grows numb. I will keep repeating this for anyone walking through quiet sorrow. You are not weak for being tired. You are not wrong for being hurt. You are simply a human learning how to love yourself. And in that, you are walking the path of awakening. There's a quote from the Buddha that I've carried with me for years. Like a compass I turn to whenever my heart begins to waver. From attachment arises fear. One who lets go of attachment has nothing to fear. It sounds simple, but if you've ever lost something or someone you deeply cherished, you'll understand this truth. What hurts the most is not the loss itself, but the part of you that can't let go. I've met so many people who come to meditation because of anxiety. They often say, "I don't understand why I've been feeling so anxious lately. My life is fine, really." But when I sit with them long enough and listen deeply enough, I begin to see anxiety isn't random. It's the child of two silent parents, attachment and resistance. We cling to what we once loved, our youth, our roles, the beautiful self-image we held years ago. And at the same time, we resist what we don't want to see: aging, loss, change. I remember meeting Tom during a morning meditation in Oregon. He was a retired Navy officer, tall, calm, with bright blue eyes. Every morning, at 6 a.m. sharp, Tom would walk around the lake near his home. "It's part of who I am," he said. "Starting my day with discipline and movement makes me feel strong in control of my life." But one morning, Tom slipped on the porch steps. A small injury to his hip turned into a long-term condition. He could no longer go on his walks. And slowly, he began waking up with a deep sense of emptiness. Not from the pain, but from losing a part of himself that he'd always identified with. "I don't feel like me anymore, teacher," he said. And there it was. The true heartbreak wasn't his hip injury. It was the image of himself he could no longer hold on to. The strong, disciplined man who never broke. Have you ever felt that? Clinging to a role. The caretaker, the mother, the one who never falls apart. And when life shifts, when a part of you changes, you feel scared. You feel lost. You feel like you're slipping away from who you thought you were. In those moments, anxiety doesn't come from the change itself. It comes from our resistance to change. In Buddhist wisdom, we call this upadana attachment, clinging to what is no longer here, gripping tightly onto what's slipping away. And the tighter we hold, the more it hurts. Like grabbing a rope being pulled from your hands. The pain doesn't come from the rope, but from the force you use to hold on. And it's not just attachment. There's also resistance. We don't just mourn the past. We fear the present. We push away aging. We try to outrun loneliness. We reject a body that's slowing down. But the Buddha taught, whatever is born will die. Whatever begins will end. He didn't say that to make us sad, but to free us from the illusion that anything lasts forever. Because when we stop fighting the flow of life, we begin to move with it. mindfully, peacefully, fully present. I remember one afternoon in a meditation hall. I was sitting with an elderly woman in her 82nd. She looked at me and said, "Teacher, I feel like a faded shadow of who I was at 40. I looked out the window and pointed to a golden leaf falling from a tree. And I asked, is that leaf any less beautiful because it's no longer green?" She smiled and nodded. "Maybe that faded shadow," I said, "holds a kind of beauty only someone who has lived deeply can understand. Letting go does not mean giving up. It means loosening your grip on what has already passed, so your hands are free to receive what's here now. Like someone who used to run and now can't run anymore, but can still walk slowly and see the beauty in each step. Like someone who used to be tough, but is now softer. And that softness is what finally allows others to feel safe coming close. And like you may have lost many things, but you still hold something precious. Your ability to awaken, to live deeply, to love wisely. If today you find yourself feeling anxious, not because of any disaster, but simply because the world no longer feels familiar, I invite you to pause, take a deep breath, and ask yourself, what am I still holding on to that no longer exists? It might be a memory, an old self-image, a silent rule that says, I must always be. And if you can see it, you can gently let it go. Not because you're giving up, but because you're growing up. Let me repeat something that has transformed my life and the lives of many I've walked with. Suffering does not come from change. It comes from not letting go. You deserve peace, not because you've held everything together, but because you're learning moment by moment how to let go at the right time. I remember a winter morning last year. I was sitting in the meditation hall, looking out through the glass window. The sky was gray. The trees had lost all their leaves, and the air was so cold that with just one breath, I was reminded, I'm alive. In that moment, a question quietly rose in me. How many emotions have passed through my life? And how many times did I believe they were me? Have you ever felt that way? When sadness comes, you think, I'm a sad person. When anxiety shows up, you whisper, something's wrong with me. I must be broken. When loneliness knocks, you sit in silence and say, I am a lonely soul. But the Buddha taught something deeply liberating, something that can change the way you see yourself completely. You are not your emotions. You are not your thoughts. You are not the storm that passes through your mind. You are the sky, vast, open, still, and storms are just passing weather. In the Anatta Lakkhana Sutta, the discourse on non-self, the Buddha offered a teaching that may sound abstract at first. This is not mine. This is not me. This is not who I am. But if you truly live by these words, they become a key that unlocks the door to inner freedom. I had a student once, Walter, 82 years old, recently widowed. He and his wife had been together for over 50 years. She was the light of his life. And when she passed, it felt like that light went out. Walter didn't speak much, but his eyes carried a sorrow so deep. I didn't need to ask. Teacher, he said quietly one day, I don't recognize myself anymore. I feel like I'm disappearing into my fear. I'm so anxious I can barely breathe. His anxiety didn't have a clear shape, but it soaked into everything. In the morning, he woke up with a heavy chest. In the afternoon, the ticking of the clock triggered dread. If I fall in this house, who would know? At night, as he lay in bed, He feared sleep might steal the last memories he had of his wife. Then one day, during a mindfulness session, I taught the group this simple phrase: "This is not mine. This is not me. This is not who I am." At first, everyone chanted it like a verse, but I invited them to close their eyes and speak the words while holding their deepest fear in mind. Walter did. He placed his hand gently on his chest and whispered, "This fear is not mine. This anxiety is not me. This loss is not who I am." Nothing miraculous happened that moment, but a few days later, he returned. He didn't smile more, but something in him had softened. "You know, teacher," he told me, "whenever the anxiety rises now, I don't get swept away by it. I just say, 'Hello, I see you, but you're not me.' And I feel less stuck." Do you see? The power doesn't come from erasing anxiety from your life. It comes from not defining yourself by it. When an emotion comes, you don't shove it away, but you don't cling to it either. You simply observe it, like watching a cloud drift across the open sky. And you, my friend, are still the sky. Still here. Still whole. Still untouched by the weather. I often say anxiety is like a visitor at your door. If you mistake that visitor for the homeowner, you'll let it run your house. But if you remember you're the one who opens the door, then you have a choice. Invite it in. Let it sit for a while. Or simply say, "I see you, but you are not me." The Buddha never taught us to destroy emotions. He simply taught us not to identify with them. Because all things, yes, even fear, are impermanent. So if today anxiety is visiting you, try this. Sit down, take a slow breath, and gently remind yourself, "This is not mine. This is not me. This is not who I am." You don't have to chant it like magic. Just say it with understanding and with the quiet confidence that you are bigger than any emotion passing through you. I know, in today's world, where everyone expects you to be fine, to stay calm, to have it all together, anxiety can feel like a personal failure. But in the Dharma, it's not a flaw. It's part of life's unfolding, and you don't have to erase it to be at peace. You only need to see clearly that it's not you. You are the observer. You are the awakened one. You, no matter your age or your story, have the power to open your heart to freedom. And I, as a monk who has walked beside many through suffering, can tell you with all sincerity, freedom doesn't come from having a perfect life. It comes from no longer mistaking yourself for the storm. If these words touch something in you, please hold on to this simple mantra like a lifeline. This is not mine. This is not me. This is not who I am. Repeat it when your heart feels heavy. Repeat it when the night feels too long. Repeat it when you feel like you're fading. And one day, you'll realize you were never fading. You were simply learning how to come home to the quiet, steady part of yourself that fear has never touched. I once sat with a man in his 70s, retired for several years now, living alone in a small apartment near a park. He looked at me and said, "Teacher, I don't know why I keep feeling this way. My home is quiet. I have enough to live. My kids and grandkids still call sometimes, but every morning I wake up with this weight on my chest, like someone else is sitting in the room, but no one can see them." I nodded slowly, because I understood. Over the years, many have come to me carrying the same invisible weight, anxiety with no clear cause, no specific problem, nothing obviously wrong, and yet it lingers. Sometimes it hums like a quiet mosquito. Other times, it sits like a heavy stone on the heart. And the very first thing I always want to say to them And to you today is this: anxiety is not your enemy. It is your teacher. I know, that might sound upside down. We've been taught since we were young that feelings like fear, insecurity, and worry are problems to fix, flaws to hide, weaknesses to get rid of. If you feel anxious, people say, just stop worrying. If you're panicking, they tell you, calm down. If you're unsettled, they offer, think positive. But in the Buddhist path, the Buddha never told us to reject our emotions. He taught us to meet them with mindfulness, compassion, and deep listening. Why? Because emotions, especially anxiety, aren't signs of failure. They're sacred messengers. Anxiety doesn't come to punish you. It comes to knock on the door of your heart and whisper, there's something here that needs your attention, your care, your healing. It's like a child afraid of the dark. They don't need you to yell at them or send them away. They need a gentle embrace, a kind eye, a warm voice saying, I see you. It's okay. I'm here with you. And if you can meet anxiety in that same way, with compassion, without judgment, without rushing to fix it, you begin to transform yourself. I once guided an older woman, well into her 82nd, through this practice. She had raised 4 children on her own, lived through war, endured tremendous loss, and now, in the quiet years of her life, she told me, Teacher, I thought I'd made it through the hardest parts, but now I'm scared again. I'm afraid of the night, afraid no one will remember me, afraid one day I'll vanish, and no one will even know. I didn't give her a long lecture. I simply invited her to try this. Each time the worry comes, don't run, don't reason, don't order it to go away. Just place your hand over your heart and say, hello, anxiety. I see you. I will not abandon you. That's it. A few weeks later, she returned. I still feel anxious, she said, but now it doesn't make me feel broken. It feels more like an old visitor, one that sometimes stops by, has a cup of tea, and leaves again. You see, none of us were born to be emotionless. We didn't come into this world to shut down what we feel. We came here to understand it, learn from it, and grow through it. In the Samyutta Nikaya, the Buddha taught, like someone who sees fire rising, not afraid of it, not touched by it, simply observing, such a person does not get burned. Emotions are like that fire. Anxiety only burns us when we cling to it or fight against it. But if we can sit still, observe it, and hold a steady heart, it loses its power to harm us. I often tell the older students at my practice center, don't force yourself to be fine. Be honest with your feelings, but start seeing them as familiar visitors, not strangers that send you into panic. And now I ask you, who's listening today? When was the last time you sat quietly and asked your anxiety, why are you here? Not to get rid of it, but to truly listen. Because maybe, just maybe, it's holding a message you need, a truth that only you can decode. You know, sometimes the people who've suffered the most become the most gentle and wise, not because they erased the darkness, but because they learned how to light a small lamp within it. Anxiety, like darkness, has no power on its own. It only becomes scary when we refuse to look at it. But when you turn toward it, face it, and whisper, I've traveled with you long enough to know you're not the enemy. You're the one guiding me home. That's when your freedom begins. So if today you're feeling anxious, don't blame yourself. Pause, breathe deeply, and ask, what is this teacher disguised as anxiety trying to show me? Maybe it's a lesson in letting go. Maybe it's an unfinished forgiveness. Maybe it's simply an invitation to come back home to yourself and be fully, lovingly present I still remember a quiet afternoon breeze during a retreat for seniors in Northern California. A woman, about 65 years old, with a kind face and slightly blurred eyes from diabetes, gently walked up to me after meditation and asked, "Teacher, how can I completely get rid of anxiety?" Her voice trembled slightly. But within that question, I could feel a deep yearning, a longing to feel light again, to be at peace, to live the remaining years of her life without being pulled by unnamed worries. I didn't rush to answer. I looked into her eyes and asked in return, "Why do you believe you need to be completely free of anxiety in order to be at peace?" She paused, then gave a shy smile. "Well, I thought being peaceful meant I had to be strong, that I had to be done with fear, that I had to be calm before I could truly be calm." I smiled, because I've heard that same belief many times. And my response is always something like this: you don't need to get rid of anxiety. You only need to learn how to walk with it, with peace in your heart. In Buddhist teachings, the Buddha never promised that practice would erase all storms. He never said that a wise person would never feel fear or worry or pain. He simply pointed to something very simple and very profound. When the storm comes, know how to steady the boat of your mind. You see, if we believe that peace only exists when fear is gone, we might wait our entire lives and never find it. Because life never stops changing. Because this body sooner or later will weaken, will ache. Because this mind at any age can still stir when old memories return, when loved ones fall ill, when children move away, when the night feels too long. If we only accept peace when anxiety disappears, then we're placing conditions on our peace. But real peace needs no conditions. I remember an elderly gentleman, 79 years old, who had once been a philosophy professor. He joined our fall retreat because he had been struggling with insomnia for years. He told me that every time he lay down to sleep, his mind turned into a movie theater, replaying what had passed, what was unfinished, and everything he feared might still happen. So he couldn't sleep, and he couldn't feel calm. I offered him one simple practice. Whenever the mind starts running, I said, don't try to stop it. Just sit still, like someone beside a flowing stream, and quietly say to yourself, I don't need to be free of anxiety to feel peace. I just need to recognize it's here, and I don't have to run. A month later, he wrote me a letter. In it, he said, Teacher, the anxiety still visits me, but I'm no longer being dragged by it. I've learned how to sit beside it, to watch it, and still keep living. And that is the deepest secret of peace. It's not about removing what hurts. It's about learning how to sit beside it with steadiness. A wise old monk from Laos once told me, don't try to find peace at the surface. When the waves are rising, become the depth of the ocean, where no wave can reach. Since then, I've always reminded others and myself, peace is not a destination. It's how you move, even in the midst of what's unfinished. And before this video ends, I want to speak directly to you, the one sitting there right now, maybe in a quiet room, that no longer hears as much laughter as it once did. If you've ever asked yourself, I've carried so much anxiety, so much hurt, is there still a chance for me to live the rest of my life with a peaceful heart? My answer is yes, absolutely yes. Because peace doesn't come from a body that never hurts, or a mind that never wavers. It comes from a heart that knows how to hold all of it, with kindness and patience. You don't have to be perfect to feel peace. You just have to be honest with yourself. Anxiety may still come, but it no longer leads you. And that is freedom. If what I've shared today has touched something in you, then I warmly invite you to stay connected with us here at Buddhism Seeds. This isn't just a channel for Dharma talks. This is a resting place, a space to breathe, a reminder that you are not alone on this journey. If this video has been helpful, please click like, share it with someone who might need it, and leave a comment below. Tell me what you're going through, what's been heavy in your heart, or what you've learned from today's lesson. And if you haven't yet subscribed to Buddhism Seeds, I invite you to do so now, so that each week I can continue to walk beside you like a quiet Dharma friend who's always here. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. May you stop running after peace, and instead realize it may already be sprouting right here, in this breath, in this very moment.